after my episode went live, Alabama gets its probably final commit of the season. Can't say guaranteed final commit, but this does get us up to 13. In Collins Chidera Onyejiaka. More than happy to pronounce his name correctly once we get a pronunciation guide, but that's what we're going to go with for now. He goes by Collins Chidera over on Instagram. A big man that is, classifying up from the 2026 class. Huge body and 6'10", 270. What have you heard about him? I know he's a top 100 guy across most recruiting sites that I've seen. Have you really heard much about him at this point?
Coming into it, no. When he was visiting, it's around the time where 2026 prospects tend to start taking their visits. AAU kind of gets busy during the summer, but a lot of the 2026 kids, you saw Caleb Holt visit Alabama recently in the past month or so as well. So summer's typically when these 2026 kids start becoming more active recruiting-wise, but he really wasn't on my radar at first. I knew once he set a visit out of nowhere that something could have been up with him. But, I mean, he's just a major physical presence in the lane. Like, he's a big body guy. I know over at Rivals says that he's 230 pounds, and other recruiting sites have 270. He's a lot closer to that 270 than 230, I'll tell you that. He's a huge human being. He's just physically dominant in the competition that he's played at the Newman School. So you tend to be a little more skeptical of big guys that play at prep schools. Not saying like Prolific Prep or those high major, high level prep schools, but schools like the Newman Prep, you kind of are skeptical of those big guys because they are playing against a lot smaller people than they are. Kind of see how physically dominating he is in that league that he plays in. But to me, physically, he's probably close to maxed out. Like he can't get much bigger than what he is. The main thing is to shed a lot of baby fat off of him and get more stronger, muscular. But he's not a offensive threat. He's not going to be a guy that's going to put up 12, 15 points a game. He's not going to be a guy that steps out and shoots 15 footers or beyond. He's not going to be any of that. He's just going to be a guy that you're going to throw in there, at least for his first year, for a few minutes. If there's foul trouble, to get rebounds, to hold his own in the paint, maybe protect the rim a little bit. But he's just going to be a guy that's going to take up a lot of space, and that's what he's going to do. Aiden Sherrell's going to do that in his own right. Mm-hmm. Noah Williamson's a big guy too. But you can't have too many big men, as you've seen with teams like Florida. I mean, they just rotate them in droves. And based on the additions that Alabama's made this offseason, they haven't added anybody shorter than 6'5". So they obviously saw something with their height disadvantage they had facing teams like Duke and Florida in the postseason. But he's a project player, and he's going to be a guy that they see something in. And if it doesn't pan out in the first couple years, then with the transfer portal, he can go find another home, and Alabama can easily replace him just as quickly as they found him.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that if nothing else, as much as what he's going to do on the floor in game, it's also what he's going to do in practice, right? Going up against a guy of that size and that physically demanding is just going to make the other players around him better, right? When you're looking at an Aiden Sherrell or you're looking at a Noah Williamson, them having to go against him every day and go up against that 260, 270, 6'10", that's just a presence, right? And obviously I'm not comparing him to this guy, but it's like the people that had to play against Shaq, right? Like if you had to go against that every day, you're just going to get better. Like you have to, because like you're going up against a guy that's just physically bigger than you and is just dominating you. It's honestly similar to how Zach Edey did a few years ago, right? At Purdue. It's when you have a player of a certain stature and that size, especially if they have that physical asset, it's a really tough thing to guard. And like I said, even in practice, I think he's going to make the team better. Would you say that this is a situation of Alabama just going after another big man because that's where they thought they were weak on the team overall? Would you consider this a bit of an indictment, maybe on Noah Williamson? I know he's a guy that some of the reports coming out, or he has, not had as good of a summer as some of the other newcomers. Let's put it lightly. Would you consider it some of that, or do you think this is just a situation of, big guys are always good to have? You're going against Florida, you're going against some of these ones. You need some extra fouls. It's not the worst idea to have an extra big body, et cetera. That's a good spot to fill.
Yeah, front court players are definitely harder to come by. You can find guards in the portal, no problem. They're expensive. As we've seen guys like Boogie Flans, Avian Lee, those guys getting up in like the $3 million range. But Collins to me is just he's cheap. He's probably not going to cost a whole lot just because he's 17 years old, should be his senior year, now he's going into college. And being a project player, he's, like you said, he's going to be a guy that's going to be a good practice body to help Aiden grow and Noah Williamson grow, because if they just each go at it every day in practice, they'll just get tired of hitting each other. Now you throw another body in there. A fair, I believe, comp for somebody that played at Alabama was probably a Richard Hendricks when he came freshman year, guy that's up my way from Athens. And I mean, when he came in, he was just huge. And, he didn't have a whole lot of skill going in, but he developed that in 2 or 3 short years at Alabama and ended up being a very successful pro overseas. But he's just going to be a guy that they looked at as somebody that, hey, this is somebody that's going to help us at latest the following year, because he is going to be very young. But they wouldn't have gotten him and asked him to reclassify. Obviously, they looked into that before, but he could be a guy that could play 5 to 6, 7 minutes a game this upcoming year. Give him some solid minutes against some bigger front courts like teams like Florida. It would have been helpful to have somebody like that against, say, an Auburn last year to kind of help on the boards and the rim defense. But obviously they see something in him. I don't think it's necessarily that they lost faith in Noah Williamson per se. I will kind of get into that how I saw him in practice in a few minutes, I'm sure. But he hasn't had a great offseason, but that's just because he's come in out of shape based on the pace of play. He played at Bucknell. But that's obviously he's obviously really skilled for his size. But I don't think it has any indication of how they feel about Noah. I think it's more of they think Collins can help them in the near future.
Sure. Yeah. And I agree with that. I generally didn't think that it was a no. I felt like I had to bring it up because I know that anybody that's on the message boards or Discords or Twitter or whatever, we've heard and we've seen the comments. So I just wanted to bring it up. But I do agree. I think that it was more of the fouls, more of the bigger body was the reasoning behind it. And obviously the cost that helps when you're dealing with, having a guy like that. And so like I said, I fully agree with that kind of standpoint. So obviously we're recording this for anybody that's